Okay, there we go. All right, so this is one I did a while ago. That's my name. And how I achieved my letters to be like this is by using tape to block them out. And then I taped everything down and then I painted over the top of it with watercolor paint. And then I waited for it to dry and then I peeled the tape off once everything was dry. And then I went in there with black marker, fine line marker, and I did the details inside my name. You're going to create something similar today. So we can work with letters, we can work with designs. It really depends on what you want to make. So I'm going to go ahead and get my blank paper here. Now this paper was watercolor paper. It's got a different kind of a tooth. It's watercolor paper has a texture to it. It's not rough, but if you run your finger over it, it's not completely smooth. Cardstock is very smooth though. So, but it is a heavy-bodied paper, so it should be able to hold up with watercolor paint or moisture pretty well. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm actually going to use little bits of my masking tape to create a design. Now you've probably seen it where people use the masking tape to make lines, and you can do that. So you can take it all the way up and just make lines on your paper. A piece that's not coordinating with what I want it to do. Sometimes the masking tape is a little bit feisty and it doesn't peel the way I want it to. Luckily I have another batch here. Work in small pieces, okay? Small pieces are going to be easier for you to manage. And the good thing about masking tape is too, if you don't like what you did, then what you can do is pick it up and rearrange it. And now as I'm working here, I'm thinking, maybe I can draw a design. You know what I want to do? I'm going to draw a heart on my paper. And I'm not worrying about the pencil marks on that right now. I'm going to go ahead and fill that in with tape. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It can go outside of the lines a little bit. You can see right here where I put the tape down. You can still see a little bit of my pencil line underneath it, and I overlapped. That's okay. Don't worry about that. The important thing with this is that you get your tape down flat. You don't want any bubbles or bumps or lumps. You want to get your tape down flat. And I don't even need to, as I'm coming around the turn here, I'm using my finger to turn the tape. It's hard to do, but you gotta work on like manipulating the tape to where you want it to go. And see, I get these little bubbles here. I'm just gonna flatten those down with my finger. Now, this structure, I don't have to fill this whole thing in with tape because when I use my paint in a few minutes, I'm not going to cover this area. I'm going to work outside of the tape where this is going to resist. If you don't feel confident and you want to put tape down on everything, that's fine. You can. Just to kind of, and then I'm going to use my scissor here to just cut and trim some of that tape because it was overlapping too much. Now maybe what I'll do is just take some smaller pieces and go around the edge of my heart. It's just masking tape, so don't worry. Like I said, if it sticks, it comes up off the paper really easily. It won't leave any marks or residue. And if it's going to overlap too much over the line, then you can cut some with a little scissor. It's just tape, okay? No big deal. Figure since Valentine's Day is coming soon, let's start doing some heart-themed things. Okay, almost around that. Now, if you're doing letters, same thing. If you want to draw out your letters first, you can. If that makes you feel more comfortable to have like an outline to work from, that's perfectly fine. That's smart. That's good planning. Sometimes a lot of good artwork comes out of good planning. Planning and creativity, of course. Creativity doesn't just mean being artistic. Creativity means figuring out how to solve problems in different ways, because art is kind of like a mystery. There's nothing there until you create it, right? And you got to figure out what you want to do. Okay, so I've got my heart covered, and just if you're at home working and you're watching and you're feeling a little bit unsure about how this area is going to work out here, if you want to go ahead and fill that in, you can. You can fill that whole area in. I'm going to be super careful, so I'm not going to worry about filling too much of that space in. Okay, so you see we've got, I know it's light colors, so it's hard to see. We've got tape around the perimeter of our shape here. So if you're working with the letters, the same thing. You basically made your letters out of your tape. And you just want to make sure that the tape is down really smooth, because letters are a little bit more difficult because there's so many angles and ins and outs. So you definitely want to cover that whole space inside your letters. Okay? All right, here we go. I'm going to take a paintbrush, a couple different paintbrushes. And my watercolor paints. I've got two different palettes. I've got solid colors, and these are more like shimmery colors, so they dry more shimmery. This one was made with these solid colors. I got these at Michael's, and they were like $5 each. If you just have a watercolor set from the dollar store, that is perfectly fine. If you just have markers and you don't have watercolors at all, you could do this with markers as well. I'll show you how to do that. And if you don't have any markers, then you can also do this with crayons. So I'll show you both of those ways. So if you're working with markers because you don't have watercolors, I just have a couple of Crayola markers here. And so what you would do is a couple different things that you could do. You could go for like effects like dots, and you can dot all around it. If you dot it on top of the tape, it won't matter because the tape is going to pull off later anyway, and it will resist. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around my heart here with my dots. This is actually going to add to the effect later, so I don't care if I'm using markers and watercolor. It makes it a mixed media project. Mixed media means you're using a couple of different forms of art material and combining them into one project. So that could be collage and paint and markers. It could be chalks and pastels and watercolors. So I used my magenta, and I got a purple one here too. I'm going to just go ahead and give it some purple dots. I'm not touching the inside, okay? I'm just working on the outside of this heart. And then what's going to happen is it's going to give it a really cool effect when I start using the watercolor, because Crayola markers are water-based, and something that's water-based, when it gets mixed with water, is going to turn to watercolor. So I've got my dots. Okay, now I've got my paintbrush, and I'm going to go ahead and use some shimmer colors, because why not? Let's have some fun. So now what I'm going to do is going to get my brush. I'm going to kind of stick with a theme here of purples and blues and dark pinks. And I'm just going to go, see, I'm going right over the top of the tape. As long as I don't go in here, I'm fine. You want to wash your brush off when you change colors. You don't want to muddy up your colors. Okay? Take good care of your stuff, and your stuff will last. But I will mix my colors on my paper. That is totally okay to do, but I don't like my brush. I'm going to get a different brush. A softer bristle brush. The one I was using was a little too firm. See what happens to, I don't know if you could see this, but when I when I touch the Crayola marker dots with the water, it spreads it. So it kind of makes it like a watercolor effect. But it also leaves the little remnants of the dots behind too, which I think is really cool because it adds to this like texture design. I'm painting right over the tape, okay? And you can do that, paint right over the tape. I'm going to add some blue. Now, the more water you use in your watercolor, the lighter the color becomes, the easier it is to spread. If you want to make your watercolors darker, you use less water, but sometimes that's difficult to pull color up when there's less water on the brush. So what you do is you wait for the first coat to dry, and then you go back over it with the color that you want to darken. And you do several layers like that. You just have to be patient and wait for it to dry in between. I'm mixing my colors on the paper here because I want to have that tie-dyed sunset kind of effect. If you've got a fan, you could put this by a fan so it dries up a little bit. Your edges of your paper might curl a little bit. It's okay. Once it's dry, put it underneath a heavy book or something heavy, or tape the corners down, and it should unroll within 24 hours. Okay, so I've let this dry a little bit, and now I'm going to go back in there with some darker colors. I'm going to add some blue. Just kind of put the color where you want it. Watercolor's fun. It just kind of melts into other colors and blends really nicely. And then you want it, like I said, the darker you want it to be, that's fine. You just got to let it dry in between coats. Get it darker. And if you want to add some cool effects, when paint is wet, so what you do is you pick another color, like I'm going to go right into this area that's wet right here with like a nice dark blue. Let me see if I can get this to where I want it to go. And I'm just going to drop color down in dots and then let the water kind of take it. Just be careful because you don't want to, here I'm going to move it around a little bit, show you guys how it moves. You just don't want to get it into your middle area where you've got the white sectioned out, okay? Alright, so we're going to let this dry. We're going to come back to this in a minute. I'm going to put it underneath my fan here in the room. While this is wet, you can kind of also work on your design ideas. So if you want to start creating some pattern boxes on another piece of paper that you can work inside of your letters or your symbol or your whatever you're doing in the middle there, and that way when it's dry you're ready to go and you've got an idea. Or you can just concentrate on colors in there, or you can even put like sequins or glitter, stuff like that in there. Okay, we're going to let this dry for a few minutes and come right back. Okay, we're all dry now, so I'm just checking it to make sure. There's one or two spots that are still a little bit damp, but I can go ahead now and start peeling this tape. So I'm going to start peeling off the tape, and I should be left, be super careful when you're peeling because it can rip the paper. Mine's ripping just a little bit, so just want to be real careful, real slow. If a piece is starting to pull up some paper like it is right here, then just kind of don't force it and just try to work around it. Use your finger to kind of push. You don't want it to take off paper if you can help it. Just be real careful. And if you find that you end up getting a hole in your paper, well, it is what it is. And don't get too discouraged. Just see if maybe you can fix it or work around it or use it as part of your design, or tape the top part to another bottom piece so that way at least the hole is covered up from behind. You don't see a big gaping hole. And this is where you get an opportunity to exercise your creative thinking. If you have a mistake or you have a little accident or a rip or a problem with it, how can you fix it without throwing it away? All right, so any pencil line that's left over can be erased. So don't worry if, or covered up. If it can't be erased, it can be covered up. So, all right, this is what I've got. I've got my heart now. I'm gonna just take my eraser and go over some of this pencil line I want to get rid of carefully. Okay. Oh man, I love watercolor. It's so much fun to play with watercolor. If you've got watercolor pens, like those brush pens, I've got those somewhere in here too. You can use those. That's lots of fun to play with. Okay. I'm pretty happy with the way this heart came out. And so now, all right, so now we've got our heart. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here so you can see. Hang on a second. So that you can see, okay, a little bit better. Okay, now I have a fine liner Sharpie, and it works good. And I've got a thick pen also. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the fine liner, and I just want to kind of, you don't have to do an outline, but I like to. So some of that watercolor is going to bleed into my outline, but I'm okay with that. That's what I like about watercolor, is that kind of bleeding paint look. It makes it look unique and interesting. And guys, you could do this project 2 times and you will not get the same effect. Because watercolor depends kind of on how much water you're using, what kind of brush you're using, where you're putting it, where the direction it's dripping. You can do all kinds of cool things with watercolor and it will never look quite the same. Alright, so now I'm going to start, I'm going to do pattern boxes, and I'm just going to divide my heart up into sections. And you could think about what you want to do. You don't have to do sections like this. You don't have to do sections at all. You can just do whatever you like. Your hearts. And then now I have the opportunity to think about what I want to go inside of these. So I might do like, you guys can look up Zentangle, Zentangle. I know I've talked about it before with other projects that we've done. Look up Zentangle patterns and you'll find thousands of designs that you can copy, or you just spend some time creating your own. I've been a doodler my whole life. I doodle everywhere I go. I always have pen and paper with me, whether it's in a meeting or when I go to the store or the doctor's office. Sometimes you're waiting for stuff. You're waiting to be called in for an appointment. I always carry, if I can't carry my whole sketchbook, because sometimes I can't, I always have something to doodle on. Because a couple different reasons. You never know when you're going to have an idea for something cool, or see something that makes you think of something that you want to design. That's one reason. The other reason is it keeps me from being bored. Another reason is this kind of doodling, when you're actually thinking and concentrating and doing something intentional, actually helps your brain, and it builds the brain. I call it art muscles in your brain. I'm going to zoom in a little tighter so you can see what I'm doing. I call it art muscles. You've got art muscles, and the only way to make your art muscles strong is to exercise them. And how do you exercise something? You work it out. And so for me, for art, when in terms of art, drawing every day, sketching every day, practicing something creative and artistic every day helps you stretch out your art muscles and strengthen them and make them stronger. You don't get good at drawing just by trying something one time. I mean, maybe you have a natural talent for drawing and makes it easier for you to understand something quickly, but most people need, and this is including professional artists, need practice every day in something. And so through doodling, I've actually come up with really cool design ideas that I'm glad I doodled, because then I would forget about them if I didn't doodle them down. It's kind of like having a really good idea and then you don't have anything to write it down with and you forget it and hope that it comes back to you. Or you have a really awesome dream and then you don't write it down and you forget all about it by the middle of the day. So sometimes it's a good idea. Some artists will tell you keep pen and paper by your bed. Writers will definitely always say this, keep pen and paper by your bed. So if you wake up from a dream or you wake up right first thing in the morning and you have a really awesome thought about something or idea, you have somewhere to write it down right away. So we're just doodling together. I don't know what you're going to make, but I know it's going to be awesome because you are awesome. This is super relaxing. But if you need to take a break and you're tired or you just don't feel like finishing right away, you have time. You have a whole week to get this done. I like just black and white for this kind of thing, but you can use any colors you like. You can add sequins or gemstones if you have them or want them. You can add some extra materials if you've got some stuff at home that you want to use. If you've got some fancy ribbon or fabric and you like to glue that down, go for it. Throw it on in there. And then, if you really like it, get a frame for it. Or make a frame out of cardboard. And hang it up. Or give it to somebody. That's even better. Give it to somebody. Give it away to somebody that you love. Okay? So you get the idea, right? I'll post the finished picture for you guys so you don't have to sit here and watch me do this whole thing. It's going to take me a little while. But you get the idea. I broke it up into sections, and that's how I'm working in it, in sections. And I'll post a picture of it finished. But you guys go ahead and get to work on your own ideas. Remember, if you're doing letters or shapes like this, just pick something big enough to fill up most of the middle. You don't want to work super small because then it's going to be really hard for you to tape that. All right, make it manageable. Remember, the tape can be repositioned before it gets smushed down onto your paper, and don't smush it too hard. You want it to come up easily and not rip your paper later. Remember, when you're painting, don't saturate too much of the paper because you don't want holes. Okay, too much paint on paper means holes sometimes. Let it dry thoroughly. While it's drying, practice some patterns, see what you want to make, and then let's see what you come up with. All right, have fun. That's the most important thing. Have a good time with this. Enjoy what you're doing. And if you can't think of something, then pause, come back to it later. You've got 7 days to think about it, okay? No pressure. Have fun with it, guys. I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.